Jeremy Corbyn, the world is going through a terrifying public health crisis. It's now very quickly turning into a huge economic crisis as well. If things have been different in that general election, you'd have been the man steering us through. How would you have handled it?
I hope we'd have started onto it more quickly and recognised that the only way you can get on top of it is by knowing how severe it is, and that means testing.
When Boris Johnson says, as he did in his video address that he did last night, that the ambition is to really ramp up testing, that's what they're really doing, does it irritate you, given that that's not the reality on the ground?
It irritates me a great deal. When nearly 3 weeks ago, John Ashworth and I met him to raise these very points with him, saying the importance of getting on top of testing, and it seemed to me that the facilities of the government to get that testing done have simply not been effective.
Just in terms of what the government has done, Boris Johnson's guaranteeing people's salaries, he's protecting renters from eviction, he's suspending rail franchises, he's borrowing huge sums to put into the economy. Are you jealous in some ways that it's Mr Johnson who's effectively nationalising the economy when it was your policy?
Well, I was condemned in November for wanting to invest in the economy, to invest in decent pay, and to pay important workers like cleaners properly. And now the government has at last understood that the only way we'll get through this crisis is by investing in all aspects of our society and our economy. So when we come out of coronavirus, let's not go back to the old ways.
How do we best emerge from this? And also, do you think this will be the death of capitalism as we know it?
Well, the free market cannot answer coronavirus. The only way that we can maintain living standards and regenerate the economy after coronavirus is by a process of public investment.
I guess the question is, do you worry that for the Labour Party, if the Conservative Party, through necessity rather than ideology, has to become a big spending, big welfare state party, where does Labour find its new identity?
I'm not sure the Conservative Party is a leopard that's changed all its spots. Yes, they have recognised the need for investment in our society. They've recognised you cannot go on underfunding public services and not pay a price. But I don't believe their ideology has fundamentally changed any more than our ideology is going to change, because we believe in spending for the good of all.
Given the strain that the government is now under in terms of dealing with coronavirus, do you think that this is the moment that the government should just press pause on those Brexit talks and just extend the transition while we're moving through this crisis?
I think we should concentrate totally now on dealing with the issues surrounding coronavirus.
Just to be clear, you think we should just park it, or do you think we should just say we're not going to do Brexit this year, we've got something bigger and more important to do?
Park it until we get through coronavirus. This isn't the time to get into some debate on this. The issue has to be dealing with coronavirus and the need for a global response on it.
The Labour Party's emerged from your leadership as a very different party to what it was when you became leader. It now has a socialist policy consensus. But the country, in both elections, embraced conservatism. So you won the argument within the Labour Party, but not with the wider public.
Well, I don't think you can say we lost the argument. I think we have put forward the argument, and in many ways what is now happening over coronavirus proves the validity of the arguments we put forward.
You also must acknowledge that you now have fewer seats in Parliament than you did when you became leader. It's bittersweet in a way for you, presumably, that you've managed to transform the party, and yet in terms of seats, in terms of the wider public, it's not quite
Of course, I was desperately disappointed at the result of the general election, desperately disappointed. It's taken coronavirus to wake everybody up to the value of what we were saying then, and I think the future of the socialist values that we put forward, the future of our party and its principles in the community, are as relevant and strong, if not stronger than ever.
Let's move to what it was like being leader. For decades, you were a backbench campaigner.
I've always been a campaigner.
You've
and
always
will
been
be.
a campaigning politician.
Always will be.
What was it like to have to move from that to becoming the Labour leader?
The first time I ever sat or spoke from the front bench was when I became leader of the party. And I've never forgotten that first Prime Minister's question time. I arrived there and the place was absolutely ram-packed, and all eyes were on us, and so I decided to ask questions on behalf of the people that had sent them in to me, because I think politics has to change. And what I've learnt the most is that you learn a lot actually listening to people in communities all over the country. There are 1,000 frustrations every day of being leader of the party, and there's never enough hours in the day to achieve the things that you want to do.
1,000 frustrations every day. What were your biggest frustrations?
The difficulty of getting a message across, and always having to balance whether you respond to the immediate or try to raise the sights into what you're trying to achieve in the long term, and dealing with large personalities that the world is full of.
What's been your deepest regret?
Not winning the 2 general elections.
How was it when you lost that second election? Was it crushing? To be defeated on that, and on that scale, it must have been tough.
Of course it was a moment one's never going to forget. But you don't give up on your principles, you don't give up on your ideas, you don't give up on your determination, and I will be campaigning forever.
Do you feel that you have been disproportionately unfairly treated by the media?
And the stuff that was written about my family, about me, about my friends, about my community, absolutely disgusting. Just disgusting. It wasn't an attempt at reporting, it wasn't an attempt at political debate, it was just assassination from day one. And that is something that is damaging for our democracy.
One thing I did want to ask you about was the sort of personal issue you must have had around anti-Semitism, criticism about your handling of it. Would you put that as your most difficult issue also personally, because of some of the personal...
Racism divides, that's what it's intended to do. And anti-Semitism is a uniquely vile form of racism that has to be challenged and contended with, and that I've done.
I was there on the day of the Race and Faith Manifesto launch, and I remember you looked, I thought, quite upset. You'd been shouted at, you'd been called a racist as you came into the building. That must have been hard.
It is totally unfair and it is totally wrong, and as far as I'm concerned, I've spent my life opposing racism in any form, and I will spend the rest of my life opposing racism in any form in our society.
PMQ's the final one. You joked with the Prime Minister. You said you sound like you're writing my obituary, and then you said, I'm still here, my voice will not be stilled. What form does that take for you?
It means that I'll be there speaking out on things that I believe in, whether it's easy or not. I do think it's the job of democratically elected politicians to be prepared to step outside the comfort zone and speak up on these issues, because if we don't speak up for them, nobody else is going to do so.
OK, thank you very much.
Thank you.